on page 20, you yourself responded, and now I'm just going to read out loud from the very first paragraph, the middle of the paragraph, and tell me if this is an accurate minute-taking of what you said. It says, Regent Connerly believed that the most haunting finding of the task force report was the fact that the average SAT score for African Americans in the highest income category is below that of white and Asian Americans with the lowest incomes. Is that an accurate first, because these are minutes and they sum up things, is that an accurate statement of your response?
Yes, it is.
So you had knowledge of what you were describing previously as a hypothetical I was making about the gap in test scores between black students and white students as being a racial divide.
There was never any question in my mind, based on the questions that you posed to me, that I've acknowledged that there is an academic performance gap on the standardized test score.
And you were prepared to go forward and use as a measure for admissions standardized tests. In fact, I think you said it was the overwhelmingly most important factor in admissions decision, standardized tests. You were prepared to use a measure that you knew gave white students an advantage. You know that the scores of white students, even the lowest income white students, are higher than black students. Is that not correct? You know that.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And so you know that if you use that as a measure to determine who gets into the University of California, you're giving white students an advantage.
I can't believe that you would frame the question that way unless you have some purpose to distort what I'm saying to you. And I've said it over and over again, Ms. Driver, that there is shared governance at the university. The faculty determines whether the standardized tests are going to be used, not the regents. The faculty had said to the regents over and over again that there's no bias in these tests, that bias has been purged. The regents do not overrule the use of standardized tests. I had said personally, I think that it is wrong for the university to overly rely on those tests as a matter of educational policy.
Mr. Connerly, you were prepared to, as you put it, jump 2 feet into the admissions process. And you were prepared to eliminate the single thing that could correct the bias using standardized tests, which was taking race into consideration. And you're telling me that you made the decision to go forward and use a criteria for admission that you knew gave an unfair advantage to white people and did or said nothing about that.
It follows by 2 years the resolution that was adopted by the regents to change from a system of race-based admissions to race-neutral. 2 years. So for you to say that I was willing to jump in when I didn't even know what the outcome was at the time is really a mischaracterization of the facts.
July 1997, you knew the outcome in the law school, didn't you? You knew the outcome.
We had already adopted SP1, Ms. Driver.
You had, and you knew what the outcome was. You knew that at Bolt Hall Law School, that black students would be virtually driven out of the law school.
Wrong.
You knew in 1997, one black student would be admitted at Bolt Hall. Did you not, Mr. Connerly?
I had no idea of what the effect would be. Besides, my actions were driven by the value that I stated to you.
Mr. Connerly, those admissions letters went out in April 1997. You already knew the outcome. You knew that it would mean the elimination of black students from Bolt Hall Law School, the virtual resegregation of Bolt Hall. You agreed that segregation in the North, de facto segregation, had the same result as legally sponsored segregation earlier, did you not?
I think it had the same result.
And if you, by removing the only policies and programs that succeeded in integrating the University of California, you created the conditions in which the government, in which there was the resegregation, the beginnings of resegregation of the University of California, Berkeley, and UCLA. Is that not correct?
Segregation, in my view, is a paradigm created by the government, which the government segregates people based on their race. Says you will go here and you will go there. It's a government's action.
And if the government casts a blind eye, it pretends that objective standards are being used, when it knows that those standards are in fact discriminatory, that's governmentally sponsored discrimination, isn't it, Mr. Connerly?
No, if the government is saying we want everyone to be treated according to the same standard, everyone to be held to the same standard, that is not the government's action to create segregation. That is not at all the same as the government segregating people on the basis of the color of their skin or their race.
But if the government chooses as a standard that it knows is biased, gives advantages to one group over and against another, then the government is sanctioning discrimination, isn't it?
Those of us who supported this government action to allow the standardized test to be used believe then, and I believe now, that people who are black or Latino or Native American are just as capable of meeting those standards as white and Asian kids are. And I said this in educational policy meetings. If the problem is that Asians are taking these advanced prep courses, let's provide the funding so that blacks and Latinos can have access to the same courses.
Targeted funding for blacks and Latinos to have the same funding for those courses was outlawed
by
high voltage, wasn't it, in 2000?
We were talking about providing that to students who were low-income students in the underperforming schools, 150 of them, with whom University of California had contracts to try to help those students to gain access to Berkeley and UCLA.
But targeted programs,
not race targeted,
programs targeted at black and Latino students were outlawed, correct?
Not race target, right, but not race targeted.
And those targeted programs that you're talking about, 10 years after the ban on affirmative action, did not result.
Ban on preferences.
Did not result in a significant increase in black and Latino enrollment at UC Berkeley or UCLA. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And there were other things that were tried, weren't there, Mr. Connerly?
Yes, many things.
And none of them altered the the decline of black and Latino and Native American students at UC Berkeley and UCLA, did they?
That's right, they did not. As you may have noticed, the number of black students at UCLA has gone up this